Are you a business owner looking for real advice and input? You're in the right place. From concept to launch to growth, funding, and beyond. Welcome to Startup Hustle with your hosts. One once sold a business for $150 million. The other, the author of $1 Million Bedroom. Here are your hosts of Startup Hustle, Matt DeCoursey and Matt Watson.
And we're back. Another episode of Startup Hustle. Matt DeCoursey here with Matt Watson. Hi, Matt.
Hey, man, it's a special day today.
It is.
This is crazy.
I know. Democracy right in front of us.
This is insane.
Is it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's just we're building up this the suspense, but let's go ahead and introduce Quinton Lucas, mayoral candidate for the city of Kansas City.
That's a pretty big deal.
Hey, good to be with you guys. Excited to be on Startup Hustle.
We are honored to have you here. And before we get started, I want to say thank you for A, for coming in, but B, I want to say I'm very impressed with the presence that you have continued to have in our startup community here in Kansas City. I think it's really important. It has a lot to do with the success and the growth of startups in Kansas City and our small business community, knowing that the local leadership is getting behind it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and you're very welcome, I think it's key to the future of Kansas City. I mean,
Right.
When we're talking about exciting places in the country and in the world, it's those places that are attracting startups. It's realizing that, these days, growing businesses really requires a good startup community, good employees, all of that. It's not just a big incentive to a classic factory like the 1950s.
Sure.
It's the new economy is small businesses, small startups,
Right.
these small businesses. And yeah, absolutely. I have to re-echo what DeCoursey said. And I think I've seen you at 6 to 10 different startup events or something like that over the last year. And I don't even go to that many startup events. So every single one I went to, you were there. So huge thank you to that. I've never seen any kind of politician at any of these events except for you. So that's a huge kudos. So yeah, very impressed with that.
So a couple things for those of you that we have a lot of listeners that aren't in Kansas City as well. So Quinton is running for the mayor of Kansas City, and that election is on June 18th. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
And how often does that occur? Is that every 4 years?
Every 4 years.
So it's time.
It's time, and we've got an open seat. So the current mayor is term limited, so we have to figure out kind of a new path, and so that's why I felt like about 300 people ran for this seat,
Yeah.
Maybe it was only 12, but we had folks that ran the gamut from a lot of different backgrounds, some of whom didn't even live in Kansas City,
Right.
which was even more exciting. But now it's down to 2, and I'm just making sure I get out there to enough events, still trying to learn, hence why I'm always talking to folks in the startup community, because there's a lot to learn about what we need to do for the future of the city.
So as we normally talk about startups and business and stuff like that. So let's I know you're a KU guy, so we'll say let's pay heed to that a little bit in regards to when you want to be a politician, you're a startup of your own. Your own brand is a startup. So what made you want to run for mayor?
I think it was probably not unlike some of you in the startup world. You see problems, right? And you start to think it takes a little bit of ambition, just a tinge of arrogance, right? And confidence, because you're like, I'm somebody who can actually solve that problem.
And a little crazy. Don't
Right.
forget that. That's
yeah.
part of the mix.
Lord Jesus, man. We are, yeah. I mean, I know you guys, you know me a little bit now. We are all some interesting cats. But yeah, I mean, I think it was, my background is a lot like a lot of other people's in the world. But I grew up with a single mom. We moved around a lot. I was homeless part of my upbringing. Education created these opportunities for me. So I wanted to see in what way can I make my own city kind of an ecosystem of greater success. So it's not just the one-off, exceptional kid who rises from a certain type of lifestyle to being successful, but it's more. And, it's weird because I'm a lawyer, so I'm the world's most boring profession where we are completely kind of risk averse and all of that. And then I said, you know what, while I'm doing all right as a lawyer, I really want to take more risk in my own personal life and career by running for office, making sure I'm creating better impact long term.
I mean, you have your own amazing startup journey as an individual to go. You said being homeless, single mom, all these things that creates a lot of adversity, right? As a kid,
No,
to get where you are, just as a lawyer, right? I mean, that alone is a huge accomplishment and journey
right. It
in
was.
itself. So I mean, a lot of people struggle, from those early days, and I was the same way. My parents were divorced, extremely poor. I was born in a trailer park in Oklahoma, but figured it out, made the journey, and
Right. You know, the thing that's crazy to me, too, on that point, I mean, so many people we've probably bumped into over the years, both in probably our earlier backgrounds and even the men and women that you bump into sometimes that say they're 30, they hate their job, but they're kind of like, it's what I do. I mean, the thing that I've liked about this journey of mine and learning about you all's as well is like, no, you're not stuck, right? I mean, always kind of keep thinking about the ideas that you have and how they can grow. And, it makes you a heck of a lot happier long term.
well, now we need to take that same thought process to Kansas City,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
we don't want it to be this stagnant 35-year-old. We need it to grow.
Well, that's true. I mean, and it's interesting because for your listeners who aren't in Kansas City, I mean, frankly, the KC story is the same one you run into in places like, I think we're doing a little better than them, but like a Buffalo or Cincinnati or all these others. And frankly, Nashville and Indianapolis were like in the same kind of area before, but some of those cities are booming, some of those aren't. And I think part of it is how do you envision yourself? How do you reinvent yourself? Let's use the Pittsburgh example too, right? Steel City is a place that really is now a heck of a tech city, startup, educational, et cetera. And so I think we do need to challenge Kansas City and Kansas Cityans to not just say, hey, everything should be the same, but instead to say, what can we do to really make this city ready to like hit this even better stride in the next generation?
There's so much that's occurring here in Kansas City and just the Midwest. And all right, so it's really expensive to operate on the coasts,
Right.
as they say. And there's been such a draw for all those companies that are out there, whether they're in New York, Boston, Miami, anywhere in California. In the Silicon Valley area, it's $4,400 on average for a 2-bedroom apartment. And that's crazy.
That's insane.
And you're seeing companies that are moving here. And I see a new one come up, once a month or quarterly. And these are big companies that are bringing jobs here. I personally think that cities like Kansas City and other, like we're the 25th biggest market in the United States. Let's be real. That's like what we are. I mean, that's what we're not going to ever be Los Angeles or New York. But all of a sudden, that's presenting advantages. So, as the mayor, what are some of the things that the city can or could do better with you as mayor in order to encourage these companies to come back to KC or just come here in general?
Right. A few different things. The first is it's got to be a place that's easy to do business, which we're not always. I mean, in Kansas City, Missouri, if you tried to open here today, you may deal with a business licensing issue. You're going to deal with earnings tax issues. I mean, there are just some things that at the front end get people to say, wait a second, I'm going to be happy staying wherever I am, be it 1,000 miles away or 1 mile away. And so always figuring out how you make it easier, right? How you make it easier for people who are creative to settle here, I think, is step one. Step two has to be a talent attraction type thing. I mean, you guys' business needs good, talented people, and some of whom are here, some of whom are going to be abroad. But what we always need to be able to do is say that we're producing and attracting, I think, a good workforce of folks that are smart, right, well-trained, diverse, and also have kind of a worldliness, right? They're the type of people who you can send to the Philippines and feel confident that they're not going to offend everybody for the first moment they land. And so, I mean, I think it's those two. And then finally, making sure you keep a community that is affordable. Now, the coasts have a big head start on us, but I mean...
Not when it comes to affordability.
No, I'm saying in terms of being expensive, right? We probably will never catch them in level of expensiveness. But at the same time, I mean, that's this whole thing of you're creating adequate housing, you're making sure that there is socioeconomic diversity in a community. Frankly, the basics like the schools are good, right? I mean, you have children.
Yeah,
right?
I do.
And so it's just kind of like people want to be around those basics too and that good quality of life stuff. But it's that combo. And then I guess I'm missing one final point. You need culture, right? I mean, that's half the reason that a lot of people, and God bless everyone from a small town, right, and that sort of thing, but it's why a lot of people will leave them sometimes. Because while I lived in Hutchinson, Kansas when I was younger, right? Hutch is a great place. But what Hutch didn't offer was like a lot of the stuff that I like around me. I could
Not a lot of diversity of activities
right.
or culture, right?
That's exactly right. I mean,
Everybody does the same thing every day.
Sure did, right? You have the
Not
state
a lot of
fair.
diversity of things
Right.
to do.
Right. You have the
people
state
to meet.
fair, high school, some junior college basketball, and like my thing is, yeah, it's nice that in a city like this one, you can basically hit what you need, which is you get your cultural setting, or if you're a guy who likes sports or a gal who likes sports, but you can do all these other things, and we need to make sure we keep fostering that long term.
You know, that you talk about having culture, and so I grew up here. I've lived all over the country. I moved back here 6 years ago. My family's from here, like 150 years from here, and I've seen Kansas City, especially downtown KC-Mo, go through such a ridiculous upswing in everything. I mean, it's cool. It's cool. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in like Austin and Denver and some of these adjacent cities. And I say they're 500 miles away, but they're still adjacent. There's every bit as much culture here as there is in either one of those places. I mean, there's live music, there's art. Actually, the art scene in Kansas City outclasses both of the other cities I mentioned.
Like First Fridays and stuff like that are great,
just
kind of cultural gatherings once a month.
Yeah, and you know, but people, like, when you talk about culture, people want things that you do when you're 18 to 35, you know, and I mean, Matt, we're old. We live in the burbs. But not everybody wants that, you know, and that's part of that. When we talk about culture, that's what's important. And I think that anybody that was listening and considering Kansas City, all right, so now when I travel places, they will ask me, they'll say, you're from Kansas City, and they'll be like, are there cowboys there? Like overseas, they'll ask me that and different stuff. I'm like, no, I live in a city just like the one we're in right now. So that perception of Kansas City is, you know, well, realistically, it's kind of podunk.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
So how do you think we can change that on a more national level to attract, you know, I don't know the answer either. I'm just curious because, like I said, as someone who's been involved in music and other things like that for my whole life, like I think there's so much going on here. There's cool venues, there's great stuff, like just the whole downtown, like Power and Light and the Crossroads. It's cool.
Right. I mean, you know, that's such a good point too, because in the last year I went to Austin for the first time and Nashville for the first time. And in both of them, and they're fine places, but particularly in Austin, I was there and I kind of said, "Oh wait, so this is
Austin,
it?
right?
Like
yeah,
this is I thought this was like the world's coolest place." And I get out and I'm like, "Oh."
And there's one street that has a shitload of traffic on it,
and it's hot as hell.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. It was like late September, and I'm still just like, "All right, this isn't that much better." And you're right. Even the music scene, I'm like, "All right, so there's a street of like bars."
And their barbecue is subpar.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so, like, I think the thing that we need to do. We started it in the Crossroads. We've done, I think, a decent job of you're seeing these kind of businesses that are building up, restaurants, others that are creative, and I think that's been good. What we need to do more of is, I think the problem and the mistake Kansas City makes sometimes is that we think that for something to be new and interesting and all that sort of stuff, that we have to actually, like create some giant district. Right, some big cool thing. And for me, the story is no, you just need to foster, frankly, not unlike startups, real estate and development is the exact same thing, which is, let something normal happen. Don't build a gigantic shopping mall, right? Don't just incentivize like these gigantic developments. Instead say, hey, how do we create like another restaurant row in an area? You know, there's an area in this city called 18th and Vine, which was kind of like the historic black downtown back in the days of segregation and all of that, where there was lots of jazz and blues and food and all that stuff. It's trying to come back, but the mistake we're making is that like City Hall is trying to do it all. That does not work, right? What we need to do is actually say, hey, maybe we'll give you the space, we'll give you like some good tax breaks on it. All you little businesses, come in, like grow, do stuff. And that's, I think, how we do it. And then in terms of and so people see that, and that'll be cool. Further on the national scale, though, we need to support startups like yours. I mean, I think the best way to change it is for more people to meet someone from here and somebody who's saying, hey, Kansas City's really got a lot going on. Another thing I'll say, and I love there are a few big universities around here. University of Missouri, Kansas City, the University of Missouri, or Mizzou is in Columbia. I work at the University of Kansas.
Yeah.
K-State is near. Frankly,
I didn't boo Mizzou. I
right.
want to point that out.
Exactly. But I'll say, like, KU, particularly because it's fairly close. Like, if we could find a way to kind of, like, build up both the university's reputation, and you may know them from basketball, but kind of saying, like, this is a great school that's doing some impactful and interesting things, and it's just this close to the city, and we're all part of this great kind of growing ecosystem, not unlike the Stanford, Northern California thing. I think that could be a place where we're seeing real growth.
So that's a good question. How are you going to fix KU's football team?
They actually have a real football coach now.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it is interesting. I mean, now granted, I mean, did they finally stop paying one of the many coaches? I mean, they're
I'll tell you
paying
what.
like 4 guys $3 million a year.
We always say a good business has to start with a problem worth solving. And
It's not that one.
and
That's right. That's right.
So that's definitely well, is that even a problem we're solving?
No.
I think my excuse as
Yeah.
as a KU fan is like, hey, we're a basketball school.
Yeah.
Right. Right. You know, one of my coworkers, I teach law at KU. He tweeted, he got in not real trouble about it, but the internet went after him because he was like, really, we should just abolish football at KU. And nobody liked that.
I mean, I'm not opposed.
I know. I was kind of
Yeah.
like, it might work.
We did decide to build a new track and field stadium over a football stadium, so there's so many priorities, right? Anyway, well, the thing I always like to point out about KU is there is a tradition of winning. When you have too many rings for one hand, you're still doing something right.
Doing all right.
Can't be good at everything. So, Quinton, first off, I appreciate your comments about growth, but as the mayor, would you make it a priority to continue to create an economically favorable environment for companies that were born and raised here, as well as ones that come in? I mean, is that a major initiative of yours, and what are some other things related to that? I know you had some comments on it, but I think we should, for those listening,
nail you down.
Yeah.
So short answer is yes, and this is why. It's actually a lot cheaper let's think about the sort of things you can do to foster a startup scene. One, kind of a little bit less regulation from the local government side. That, to me, is, if not cost neutral, right, kind of cost positive. You don't have staff that are looking over your forms, right? We still, like, city ordinance still requires people to, like, enter things on the, quote, World Wide Web. I mean, because the last time we reformed it was like 1997, and we thought it was cool and new. So, I mean, I think modernization there is going to be a key step. I think the other thing is we have a business creation office. What that office usually sees itself as is like, how do we come up with a license for, I don't know, some liquor serving establishment? It's really old-fashioned. You know, my view would be, all right, use one of those business officers and really do real work on working with startups that are here now, helping them find access to capital, right, and link them to guys like you. And then the other thing is saying, hey, what can we do, almost like a concierge service, to, like, help you grow? And so those would be, I mean, 2 key initiatives, the total cost of which are probably, you got to pay somebody and you got to, like, do less regulation on the other side. You're probably looking at less than $150,000 a year just to start. And that's not that much in a $1.7 billion budget.
When you look at the economic impact that
That's right.
can have on the other side, so
Right.
you know, startups. Well, every business was a startup at some point. The biggest, Ford was a startup.
Right.
Any blue chip stock was a startup at some point.
Right.
And you know, it does have to start somewhere. There's some pretty exciting things going on in Kansas City as well. I mean, we've had some companies that have recently announced some very large amounts of capital. I mean, that's coming in to Kansas City,
Right.
and that's the key. And you talk about, hey, what do we need? A couple people to maybe help foster these
Exactly.
businesses to get set up, and
Well,
maybe-
those wins create more wins, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
that understates. It's like
Somebody-
it's like a domino.
Right.
Somebody like
effect of
Pay It
wins.
raised
Yeah.
$100 million.
And then another 25 follows
Yeah,
that,
and
yeah,
not only does that create jobs, but the founders who inevitably got some of that money, hopefully they take that money, invest it in
They
other
do.
startups.
they hire
Right.
people, they
do.
buy ads,
Those
they
seeds
do
fall from the
stuff.
tree,
Yeah.
and
Right. They invest in their local politicians. I mean,
and
they do, like, good stuff.
and the talent that comes from that. That's one of my favorite things about the Vin Solutions story, my original company, is there's half a dozen companies that would not exist today if it
Yeah.
wasn't for Vin Solutions. The talent, the people that worked there eventually went on.
Right.
Like Jason Rice from Lot Pop that was on our show. He worked at Viato, which was one of the sister companies for Vin. but because he worked for Viato, he got that training at that startup. Now he started his own. Like that all of that keeps going, and we have to keep it going.
We actually thought about this, and it was Matt Watson that started this, but we looked at ourselves and we said, how many jobs have we created? And so for those of you that are joining us for the first time or aren't familiar, Matt Watson was one of the co-founders of End Solutions. And there's the other side of the startups that was an exit of a $150 million sale. Now, it's still here in Kansas City. Aren't all your
co-founders still exist? Yeah,
the company doesn't. Aren't all your co-founders still here?
They're all still here, and one of them is now the CEO of another company that he actually moved from California back to Kansas City because he wanted to stay here, and has created 200 or 300 jobs in Kansas City. So again, like all those.
But what was the number you came up with? You thought about? Didn't you say that you felt that the businesses that you've started and the enterprises that you've helped grow have created around 2,000 jobs?
About 1,000.
1,000.
About 1,000 jobs.
Right.
I was in the ballpark. I'm not up at that number, but mine is more of a worldwide total, and I mean it's still in the hundreds.
Right.
And but you talk about the significant impact. I mean, these were all startups.
Right.
Like, I mean, literally, I wrote a book about starting a business in the extra bedroom of my home. I mean, it's got to start somewhere.
Right.
I mean, you don't start in a skyscraper.
Right. And
At
the thing
least I
is,
didn't.
the thing that's amazing to me as I listen to this too, it's like you did that without huge tax breaks, right?
No.
You did that without some big random help. And so what that tells me, and this is where I'll get slightly controversial, and even if you don't live in a Kansas City, every city has this, which is the quote business community, right? And it's kind of usually a gilded set of men over 50, and not that I don't love them too, because I hope to be one day, but nevertheless, it's this thing where they kind of call the shots in a lot of stuff that happens in the city, and and it's not always the right thing.
They also take no risk.
Right, exactly. They're kind of parked at a few key institutions, and largely what they're doing is just transferring money between themselves. The big law firm, the big bank, the big business, the whatever, right? And it's just that. And it's how cities stagnate, frankly. It's how you have places, kind of like, and not that there are some great things happening in St. Louis right now, but, for a while, they were just letting a few of these big companies, McDonnell Douglas, Anheuser-Busch, all of which have been acquired, right, kind of be Monsanto, be the ones that called all the shots in the communities and could be kind of exclusionary to others.
Sure.
And so what I've liked about Kansas City is that, first of all, we're addressing that now. I think we need to continue, and as mayor, I think you have to be part of that conversation of saying, old rich guys, you're not the only ones, and you're not the only ones that are calling the shots or speaking for what is, quote, the business community, because it's a heck of a lot more diverse now, and it's a lot of people that are doing very different things who weren't around 5 years ago, and that's okay.
The number one thing I think we need that would help the community is for those existing larger companies to figure out how to do business with the smaller companies in some way or another, right?
That's been a topic we recently discussed. The gap.
Be their custom, be our customers. And I say our, I'm representing the small guys, right? Like, if I had Sprint and Cerner and Garmin and H&R Block and AMC and all these companies as customers in any way, that would be huge to me. That would help ensure that my business exists and succeeds, right? Like, that's what the community needs, is to be focused on Kansas City. How do Kansas City companies help Kansas City companies?
And that's something that's been a focal point of Matt and I, and you have come to one of our events where we've tried to take a different take on getting local businesses together. Just getting people in Kansas City to sit down and talk about doing business with each other. Like, don't look outside of your own yard before you're positive that what you need isn't in your yard. Speaking of which, and we were talking about money, so everybody running for office could use donations.
Yeah.
And I don't want to pass over that. And if you're listening, we'll put a link to Quinton's stuff wherever it is that you're finding this, watching this, or listening to it. But do you want to tell those listening how they can drop a couple bucks in your campaign account?
Yeah, go right ahead. It is at Quinton, Quinton, Lucas, Lucas.org, QuintonLucas.org. The website, you'll get there. There'll be a cool video background. One of the three choices for you is to donate. It's interesting because when you talk about startup communities, it's interesting because I went out to Washington recently, and we're using a digital ad firm, TV, all that sort of stuff, they work not in like old buildings, but in these, interesting spaces with a number of other companies, right? You're seeing that model in tons of cities. And then when I left, I was like, wait, there's nothing special about this political advertising firm that's doing digital stuff being in Washington,
Yep.
right? And I want to like see, frankly, more here, more in so many other places. And so that's why our campaign, our opponents done a lot more of the traditional, let's go with the regular folks and all that sort of stuff. We got through the primary, a 12-person primary, and just to give y'all background, and it's kind of like the story you guys have, because people do not believe in you sometimes. The local newspaper, another good aging institution, right, put a poll out 2 weeks before the election, had us tied for 6th place, right? We rose 14 points in the polls, right, ended up getting through the primary. We've been leading the polls for the entire runoff since. And part of that was because we invested heavily in digital, right? We invested heavily in kind of different grassroots ways to reach people, as opposed to doing the classic buy a bunch of TV ads, no offense to TV, but buy a bunch of TV ads and then just like send mail, right? Because everybody has been telling us for years, oh, every voter on average is 70 years old. Just go with that. And I'm like, first of all, many of them are also on, right, their phones at least, or on a computer. And then the other thing is, it's like you can always engage more people. We were finding new audiences. So QuintonLucas.org is where you can go to find out more of that. And I've loved meeting kind of those folks, because you're right. I mean, I think running for office is kind of like a startup. We have a videographer who himself is kind of like a startup guy. He works at KU, but knows literally everything, and was like, I can make some more on the side too.
And speaking of videographers, you brought a few with you today. So,
Yeah.
so since we're plugging stuff, I'm going to post pictures of that. This is actually the first time, and guys that point cameras at me love it when I look right at them and wave. It's always really popular, but at Startup Hustle Podcasts on Instagram, we'll post those pictures. So it's definitely a first for us here on the podcast. Have we have a film crew come in before?
No. I mean, there's usually one that follows me, but not usually in here.
And usually it's like the investigative story where they're like, evil Matt has
Yeah,
done
for 2020.
something.
Okay, this is all right. I'm
For
gonna
2020
I
and
have to
stuff,
go
yeah.
there. So, ever since the podcast, so we're a top 100 business podcast, like the general category on Apple now. And Watson keeps making rock star demands. He wants a tour bus, 3 pounds of all green M&Ms. I don't know why you need a dressing room with a seahorse in it, but you do what you need to do. And now you have a film crew.
Eclectic, yes.
Okay. Well, we'll get back to the election. So
I think it's important. Again, we talked a little bit about your campaign, like being a startup, and I think a lot of that is because you wake up every day and you have like new problems and new challenges, and you're like, I could do this, or I could do this, or I could do this. How do I prioritize my time? Where do I go? Where do I spend my resources? Same thing with the advertising you're doing, right? Like, do I do ads on Facebook? Do I do ads on Instagram? Do I do a billboard? Do I do a TV ad? Do I walk down the street and just plant a sign in somebody's yard? Like, where do I put my attention?
Right.
And those are the same thoughts that every startup has, right? Like, how do we get our name out there? Who is our customer? Where are they? How do I reach them? It's like all the same challenges.
Exactly.
Is everything I've done wrong? Am I going broke?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is my competitor doing?
Exactly.
Right.
All of it.
What can I do better? Am I doing it fast enough?
It's just like being a startup.
Yeah.
So this is a question I have for you guys, because in politics you deal with this all the time, and it's a tough balance, which is sometimes your supporters are some of the least helpful folks, because they'll be like, hey, Lucas, your opponent is, up on all these TV ads. You got to do that. Then you get 10 more calls about it. And you're like, I need to stick to my plan. And it's like you're on a plan or something like that. I mean, do you ever get either people who've invested or employees or spouses that are kind of like, no, you need to do it just like this? Or my brother had a company that was doing it this way. I mean, how do you kind of stay true to what your plan is?
I think that, it's probably not as frequent
Right.
as you. And I told you the other night, I have a strong appreciation for what you do and the energy that you have to do it. Because by the time you saw us the other night, I think you had gone to about 12 things that day, and one of them wears me out. But yeah, I mean the proverbial peanut gallery always has comments, concerns, and other stuff like that. And I think in the end, like you said, you have a plan, you have to stick with it, but you also have to be ready to change your plan. I mean, just sticking to the plan for the sake of doing it isn't always the right thing to do, but and also not making decisions emotionally.
Yeah.
Not saying 2 days into the plan isn't going to work. Like, you have to give it a specific amount of time to succeed, and then reevaluate. And I'd say that I'm always in a constant state of reevaluation and change if you need. I think that we use in building software, they use the term agile. So I think that's important. What do you think, Watson?
I think the hardest part is being self-aware that you need to do that sometimes, right? Like, we get stuck in our ways of doing a certain thing, and we get a lot of opinions from the peanut gallery, like you said, but sometimes the hardest thing that we do is being self-aware of, like, okay, I do need to make some changes, because we get set in our ways too. So it
requires tough decisions, and we've talked about that a lot here on the podcast. Is business isn't easy, and sometimes you have people that you really like, and you have to make decisions like that aren't always favorable for them. And politics has got to be the same way. I mean, and I think that the turning point for me over the last decade was really just accepting the fact that I wasn't going to please everyone, and not everyone was going to like me, and that sometimes when I was doing the best job possible, I wasn't going to be popular at all. That's one of the harder parts. And I think that's something that people that are in leadership positions, especially in business, don't always, get around. Like, sometimes you have to make unpopular decisions, but they're the one that might be right.
Right.
And I think also,
and that's definitely true when you're actually the mayor, right?
Yeah.
You're like, we need to do this policy, even though part of city council or part of the citizens don't agree. But you're like, for the greater good, this is what we got to do.
At our businesses, there's times that things get tough as well, and you have to be willing to shoulder all of that.
Yeah.
And shield everyone the same, like throw an umbrella over everyone. And then at the same time be able to quickly turn, and it's up to you. You're the one that has to embrace and absorb all that, to deflect it and keep it away from the people that work for you and those that are helping you achieve your mission. But when things are great, you have to remove that and be ready to share the wins, share the victories, share all of that, and because otherwise it starts to appear as kind of selfish.
Right.
Are you pointing at Mixtape? Did you think of a song?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, man. All right. So I haven't thought of a song, but we like to always take a break in every show, and we play Mixtape the Game. You can check it out at mixtapethegame.com. We have a digital version coming soon. So we pull a card out of a deck.
And we should point out, this is a local startup, a local company based in Kansas City.
This is. We invested in this as well. They sold 50,000 of these things to like Target and other places last holiday season. You talk about just little homegrown stuff that matters, and like we want to work with. So Joel Johnson's the local creator of this, and we want to try to make this big. We want to make Kansas City the mixtape capital of the world. I haven't thought of a song yet, so I'm actually just buying time. But we'll name a scenario, and then we all name a song, and then we have to vote for who has the best one, and you can't vote for yourself. So here you go. The best song for riding a sparkling unicorn across a rainbow.
I've got one.
Go for it, Matt.
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
Oh, that's a good
one.
Oh,
wow.
I know. That's a tough one. I'm really like thinking like, can I instead just pick a whole entire catalog and go with Elton John's entire catalog? Doesn't he have a Yellow Brick Road song?
Yeah,
he does.
Okay, I'm going with that, but I can't even sing it, so I don't feel like I'm legit.
Yeah. I mean, I told y'all I thought this was a choice for somebody who's under the influence of something. So I'm gonna stick with Puff the Magic Dragon.
Oh, that's pretty good. Pretty good.
But hey, look. Since I want to vote for Quinton, I'm voting for him now for Mixtape as well. So
all right,
you might as well vote for him too.
Well,
you never vote.
I'm
for
not
me
voting
anyway.
for you. So yeah, I'm voting
for
Quinton.
All right, man.
We have a winner.
Now, you talk about overcoming adversity. Getting Watson's vote at Mixtape is next to impossible for me.
You know, now I realize if I'm successful next week in the election, I should make that my walkout song.
Do it.
Literally. I'll tell you what, a lot of people be confused, but the stoner crowd of Kansas City be like, I love that dude. Didn't vote for him, but love him.
That's true. That's actually an interesting change that's come to Missouri.
Really? It has.
I mean, it's going to be.
We're 7 months away from having legal medical.
Medical.
I thought it was even closer than that, but maybe I'm wrong.
We're doing the regulatory kind of stuff, which, frankly, to your point on governments, is another problem. Not that you don't need to regulate in certain ways, but we're doing it all wrong. We're basically letting Anheuser-Busch lobbyists draft it all, and we're going to do something that does not let smaller market entrants in, and instead is going to be kind of a pro-big farm thing, which I think is unfortunate, but I'm not governor. And
Yeah,
so
that's
keep
an
working.
issue that, so here, we're actually technically in Kansas
Yep.
at this recording. I grew up in Kansas, and I'm still just shocked that Kansas is like so slow to adopt that. I mean,
They could use
aren't
it.
we an agriculture state? No doubt.
Right.
Well, the pressure's on. They're sandwiched between Colorado and Missouri.
And
now,
everybody
so,
else.
Yeah.
So we'll
Right.
see.
The
We'll
pressure's
see about
on.
that. So, okay. So Quinton, a couple things here for those of you in KC Mo. The election's next Tuesday, June 18th. You can also check out Quinton Lucas. It's Quinton with an O-N.
Yes. Yes.
Lucas.org. You have a lot of content
Do.
and other stuff there. It's not hard to find information about you. You've been in a lot of local debates.
Right.
And other stuff. If you want to check out what he's had to say, I encourage making a donation. Unfortunately, I do not live in KC Mo, so I'm going to need someone to go vote for Quinton for me.
Yeah.
Same here.
I mean, I think
I can't vote either.
I heard about that in like a presidential race once, where people in different states were like exchanging their vote, and so like a dude in Wyoming would be like,
Like a vote
"Well,"
exchange?
Exactly. It's
Weird.
like, could somebody in Iowa actually make the vote that I want, and I'll make it so your guy gets something out here. So
Yeah, if you go vote for Quinton and you tag at Startup Hustle Podcasts on Instagram of you voting, then we'll send you a gift box or something like that. Yeah, because why not? Because why not, right? By the way, we're probably going to get tagged in like 4,000 things. I'll have to like order all new copies of my books. We'll be like, dude, fire up the T-shirt press, hurry. We'll have to issue an apology for like taking 6 months to get it out. We'll have to call the mayor.
I'll have to call the mayor.
We'll have to call the mayor and be like, dude, hopefully this isn't a big problem. So, well, Quinton, I know that you're in the heat of the battle.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming by.
Yeah, thank you so much
It
for your
really
time.
does. It means a lot to us. And I just want to say thanks again, because I know that so many people I've talked to in our local startup community echoed the same sentiment that Matt and I had at the beginning of the show. Thank you for being involved and caring and showing up and being a voice. And the events that we're often at are at night, and it's easy to just go home and not care. And I know that I know you have a lot of support from the folks in that community. And I'm looking forward to Lucas as mayor.
Hey man, I'm looking forward to it too. I will come back and we can talk about the good work we're doing to make it better in KC.
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to saying that I beat the mayor at Mixtape. See you next time.
See ya.